Somewhere inside, you lives a life you can almost feel but haven't touched yet. You've sensed it in the quiet moments, driving home on a road you've driven 1,000 times, awake at 3 a.m. for no reason, staring at a screen while your mind quietly drifts somewhere better. A version of you that seems to already exist, just slightly out of reach. And maybe you've wondered why certain people seem to slide into that life while you keep circling it, close, but never quite in. Here's what almost no one explains. Reality doesn't shift the day your circumstances finally cooperate. It shifts the moment something inside you moves first: your attention, your identity, your inner state. 3 quiet levers that decide what you're even allowed to see, to become, and to receive. Most people spend decades pulling the wrong ones. Over the next hour, I want to walk you through the 3 that actually move something real, and why the life you keep sensing might be far closer than the one you're living right now. For most of your life, you were taught that reality is something that happens to you, that the world arrives first, and you simply respond to it. You react, you cope, you adjust, circumstances lead, and you follow. It's such a quiet assumption that you've probably never questioned it. And yet, almost everything you're about to understand depends on turning that assumption around. Because the mind was never a passive screen that the world projects itself onto. It's closer to a filter, an editor, a translator working silently beneath your awareness. Right now, in this exact moment, your senses are being flooded with millions of pieces of information, sounds, sensations, micro-signals your body registers and discards. You're conscious of almost none of it. Your brain quietly decides, long before you arrive, what deserves your attention and what disappears into the background. Neuroscientists sometimes point to a small cluster of neurons at the base of the brainstem, the reticular activating system, as part of how this filtering works. It's the reason the friend who just bought a certain car suddenly sees that car everywhere. The cars were always there. What changed wasn't the road. What changed was what they were now tuned to notice. Attention didn't just describe their reality, it selected it. Sit with that, because it goes deeper than a trick about cars. If your attention is quietly choosing what you're allowed to perceive, then 2 people can stand in the same room, live in the same city, face the same year, and inhabit entirely different worlds. One walks through a landscape of closed doors. The other walks through the same street and sees openings, invitations, small, strange coincidences. Neither is lying. They're simply tuned to different frequencies of the same reality. This is where the science begins to brush against something older. For centuries, physicists studying the smallest layers of matter have wrestled with a deeply uncomfortable pattern that at the quantum scale, the act of observing seems to participate in what is observed. Particles behave one way when measured, another way when left alone. Interpretations of this vary enormously, and serious scientists disagree about what it means. But the poetic weight of it lingers, and it's hard to shake. The observer is not standing safely outside the picture. The observer is somehow woven into it. I'm not asking you to believe your thoughts rearrange atoms. That's not the claim, and anyone who promises you that is selling something. What I'm asking is quieter and, in a way, more demanding. What if the same principle that governs your attention on the small human scale, this filtering, this tuning, this quiet selection, is running your entire life and you've simply never watched it work? Think about the last time your life genuinely changed, not the surface of it, the inside. A relationship ended or began, a belief cracked, something you'd carried for years finally set itself down. Notice that the external event was almost never the real turning point. The turning point was internal, and it happened first. Something inside you moved, and only afterward did the world seem to rearrange itself to match. You called it luck, or timing, or coincidence, but the sequence is always the same if you look honestly. Inside first, outside after. This is the uncomfortable, liberating center of everything I want to show you tonight. The life you keep sensing, the one just out of reach, isn't waiting on a change in your circumstances. It's waiting on a change in the one who perceives them. And that change moves through 3 specific channels, not vague ones, not mystical ones. 3 concrete levers that decide what you're able to see, who you're able to become, and what you're able to let in. Most people never touch them because most people spend their whole lives trying to fix the reflection in the mirror while ignoring the face standing in front of it. They rearrange the outside and wonder why the inside stays the same. They change cities, jobs, partners, and carry the identical inner world into every new room and then quietly blame the room. You've probably done this. I certainly have. And there's no shame in it because no one ever handed us the map. We were told to work harder on the world, and no one told us the world was answering something deeper. So before we open the first lever, I want you to hold one honest question, the kind you can only ask alone. Not, what do I want from my life? Something sharper. Who would I have to become for that life to feel ordinary? Keep that question close. Everything after this is an answer to it. The first lever is the one you've been using your entire life without ever noticing you held it. Attention. Not attention in the small sense, not focus, not concentration, not the thing productivity people try to sell you back at a premium. I mean attention in the older, heavier sense. What you give your awareness to, what you let occupy the center of your inner life, hour after hour, day after day, without ever choosing it on purpose. Here is something worth slowing down for. Whatever you place your attention on doesn't just get noticed, it grows. Not metaphorically, it grows in the literal architecture of your brain. The field of neuroplasticity has spent decades demonstrating that repeated attention physically reshapes neural pathways. The circuits you use thicken, the ones you neglect quietly fade. Your brain is not a fixed object you were issued at birth. It's closer to a landscape. And attention is the water. Wherever it flows, something grows there. Wherever it doesn't, something dries. Now think about where your attention has actually been flowing. Be honest, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. For most of us, attention has been running the same worn grooves for years. The replay of an old humiliation. The rehearsal of a conversation that may never happen. The scanning for what's wrong, what's missing, what could still collapse. We think we're just thinking, but we're watering. Every time you return to the memory of who hurt you, you're strengthening that pathway. Every time you rehearse the fear, you're building the muscle of that fear. Attention is never neutral. It's always constructing something. The only question is whether you're constructing on purpose or by accident. And most of us are building by accident. We let the loudest thing in the room have our awareness. The notification, the worry, the ache. And then we wonder why our inner world feels so chaotic and so out of our hands. But the loudest thing is almost never the truest thing. It's just the most practiced. This is the part people resist, so let me say it plainly. Your attention is not just observing your life, it's authoring it. The reality you experience is, in large part, the reality you keep looking at. 2 people lose the same job. One keeps his attention fixed on the closing door, and for months that door is the whole world. Its slam, its finality, the story of everything it took. The other feels the same grief, doesn't deny it, but slowly, deliberately begins turning her attention toward the space the closed door revealed. Not with fake positivity, with direction. And within a year, their lives are unrecognizably different. Not because the event was different, but because the observer was. You've met both of these people. You've been both of these people. There's an old idea, older than any of the science, that where attention goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, life follows. For a long time, I dismissed that as the kind of thing printed on a candle. But the science underneath it is real, even if the phrasing got cheapened. What you attend to, you feed. What you feed, you become. And what you become, you meet everywhere you go, because you carry it into every room. So the first shift is not grand. It's almost embarrassingly small, which is exactly why people overlook it. It isn't about forcing yourself to think positive. Forced positivity is just another form of not looking. The shift is about becoming the one who notices where your attention has drifted, and gently, without punishment, choosing to bring it back, again and again and again. That again and again is the whole practice. Nobody masters their attention in a single moment of insight. You reclaim it the way you'd reclaim an overgrown garden, not in one heroic afternoon, but in 10,000 small returns. Your mind will wander back to the wound, the fear, the old story. That's not failure. The return is the work. Each time you notice you've drifted and you choose again, you're laying down a new path in the landscape, one thin thread at a time, until one day, the new path is the wide one, and the old groove has quietly grown over. I want you to notice something about the last few minutes. As you listened, your attention was here, fully. And for these few minutes, the worry you walked in with went quiet. It didn't vanish because I solved it. It went quiet because your attention moved. That's the lever. You just felt it work. Now imagine doing that on purpose, not by accident, not for 3 minutes, for a life. Because attention decides what you see. But the second lever decides something far stranger. It decides who is doing the seeing. There's a question that sounds simple until you actually try to answer it. Who are you? Not your name, not your job, your history, the roles you fill for other people. Underneath all of that, who is the one doing the living? Most people have never asked it. And the ones who do usually discover something unsettling. The self you think of as fixed, solid, permanent, the just how I am, turns out to be far more fluid than you were ever told. This is the second lever, and it's the one that changes everything because it sits underneath the first. Attention decides what you see, but identity decides where your attention naturally goes without you having to fight for it. Change what you look at, and you change your day. Change who you believe you are, and you change what you're even capable of looking at in the first place. Let me show you what I mean, because this can stay abstract for too long. Picture two people walking into the same room full of strangers. The first carries a quiet, unexamined belief. I'm not the kind of person people are drawn to. He doesn't think this consciously. It lives below thought, in the body, and watch what it does. His attention automatically hunts for evidence. The person who glanced away, the conversation that didn't include him, the pause that felt like rejection. He finds it because he's tuned to it. He leaves, confirmed. The second person carries a different quiet belief about who she is, and her attention hunts for a different world entirely. The open face, the small opening, the way in. Same room, same strangers, two different realities, and each one walked out more convinced of the self they walked in with. The identity came first. The evidence came second. It always does. We have this backwards. We think we behave in line with our circumstances, but far more often we behave in line with who we believe ourselves to be, and then we call the result our circumstances. The man who isn't a morning person doesn't fail to rise early because of biology. He fails because rising early would contradict the person he's quietly decided he is, and the self protects its own story with a loyalty that would be touching if it weren't so costly. We don't get what we want, we get what we're being, and we are extraordinarily faithful to the identity we've cast, even when it's quietly ruining us. Here's the part I find genuinely moving, and it took me years to trust it. That identity was not handed down from the mountain. It was assembled, piece by piece, mostly before you were old enough to consent. A comment from a parent that landed too hard. A season of failure your young mind mistook for a permanent verdict. A role you were assigned in your family and then, out of love or fear, agreed to keep playing for 30 years. You didn't choose most of who you think you are. You inherited it, absorbed it, and then mistook the costume for the skin. And if it was assembled, it can be reassembled, not through force, not by shouting affirmations at a mirror you don't believe. That approach fails precisely because the deeper identity hears the affirmation and quietly answers, "That's not us," and drags you back to the familiar. The nervous system prefers a known misery to an unknown freedom. It will choose the cage it recognizes over the open field it doesn't, every single time, unless you work with it instead of against it. The real shift is subtler and, honestly, harder. It's not pretending to be someone new. It's beginning to question, with genuine curiosity, whether the old someone was ever true. Was I really bad with people? Or was I a shy child who drew one conclusion too early and never updated it? Was I really not disciplined? Or was I someone who'd never once been shown that discipline could feel like devotion instead of punishment? You start to loosen the grip, and in the loosening, something remarkable happens. A little space opens between you and the identity you assumed was you. In that space, for the first time, there's room to choose. Because here is what the observer effect whispers if you let it reach the human scale. The one doing the observing is not neutral and is not fixed. Change the observer and you change what can be observed. You are not only watching your life through a lens, you are the lens, and a lens can be reground. The people who seem to shift realities are almost never doing something magical. They've simply stopped defending an old self that was never really theirs to begin with. They let it die a little. And in the space where the old identity used to stand so certainly, a new one gets to take its first quiet breath. So the question underneath the first question is this: not what do you want? Who are you willing to stop being? That's the second lever. And once attention and identity move together, the third one, the strangest of them all, finally becomes possible. The third lever is the one people feel long before they can name it. State, the inner weather you're broadcasting, whether you mean to or not. You already know this one in your body, even if you've never put words to it. You've walked into a room and felt the tension before anyone spoke a word. You've been near a person whose calm somehow settled your own nervous system without a single sentence exchanged. We are not sealed containers moving past each other. We register each other's states constantly, below language, below thought. And here's the part that matters. You are always in some state. There is no neutral. Every moment, you're radiating something, and the world is quietly responding to it. Attention decides what you see. Identity decides who's seeing, but state decides what you can receive. And this is where so many people, good people, get quietly stuck. They do the inner work. They shift their focus. They question the old self. And then they stay locked in a state of subtle grasping, of anxious wanting, of if I don't get this, I'll be crushed. And from that state, almost nothing good can land. Not because the universe is punishing them, because desperation is a frequency and it narrows everything. A clenched hand can't receive, it can only clutch. There's a strange truth here that took me a long time to make peace with. The things you chase from a state of lack tend to run from you, and the things you hold from a state of fullness tend to arrive. Not as a reward, as a resonance. When you're anxious, your attention narrows to threat, your identity contracts into the frightened one, and your whole system starts hunting for confirmation that you're right to be afraid. When you're settled, genuinely, not performed, your perception widens, and suddenly you notice the opening you were too tense to see an hour ago. The opportunity was always there. Your state was the door, and it had been closed. This isn't about forcing joy. I want to be careful here because the culture around this stuff turns raise your vibration into one more thing to fail at, one more chore, one more way to feel broken for having a hard Tuesday. That's not it. Your state isn't a performance you owe anyone. It's a truth you tend to, and you don't tend to it by pretending. You tend to it the way you tend to a frightened animal, not by yelling, "calm down," but by making it safe to soften, slowing the breath, loosening the grip, remembering in the body and not just the head that you are already more okay than the fear insists. And when your state shifts, everything downstream shifts with it. From a settled state, your attention naturally rests on possibility instead of threat. From a settled state, you stop defending the frightened, contracted identity because you no longer need its protection. The three levers were never really separate. They're one motion, and state is the ground the other two grow in. I want to pause here because you've been generous with your attention for a while now, and I don't take that lightly. If any of this has landed, if even one sentence made something quiet in you go, yes, do something small for me before you move on. Go to the comments and leave 3 words. Just this. I am shifting. That's all. Not because a comment changes your life, but because saying something out loud, even in writing, is how a new state begins to take root. You're not performing it. You're practicing it. And when you scroll back through the comments and see hundreds of other people who wrote the same 3 words tonight, people you'll never meet, sitting in their own 3 a.m., feeling the same pull toward a life they can almost touch, something happens. You realize you were never the only one circling that better version of yourself from the outside. I am shifting. 3 words. Then come back to me. Because now that you can feel how state works, I have to tell you the thing almost no one tells you about it. The reason your state keeps snapping back to the old setting, no matter how many times you reset it, there's a mechanism underneath it. Quiet, automatic, running since childhood. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's where we're going next. Here's the thing no one warns you about. You can shift your attention, question your identity, soften your state, and then, days later, wake up right back where you started, as if none of it happened. And the cruelest part is how it makes you feel, like you failed, like the change didn't take because something is wrong with you specifically. Nothing is wrong with you. You've just met the mechanism. Every one of us carries an inner set point, an emotional thermostat calibrated long ago that has one job: keep you at the temperature it decided was normal. Not happy, not free, normal, familiar, survivable. And this thermostat does not care whether familiar is good for you. It only cares that it's known. The subconscious, in its ancient logic, treats the familiar as safe and the unfamiliar as danger, even when the familiar is quietly killing you and the unfamiliar is everything you've ever wanted. Watch how it works, because once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere in your life. Someone raised in chaos finds a calm, steady relationship and feels strangely bored, restless, convinced something's missing. So they create a little chaos just to feel like themselves again. Someone who believes deep down they don't deserve abundance finally gets the money, the recognition, the win, and within months they've sabotaged it, spent it, pushed it away, and returned to the lack that feels like home. We call these people self-destructive. They're not. They're just thermostatically loyal to a setting they never chose. The system is working perfectly. It's just aimed at the wrong target. This is why willpower alone almost always loses. Willpower operates in the thin daylight of the conscious mind, and the conscious mind, by most estimates, runs a small fraction of the show. Underneath it, the vast machinery of the subconscious hums along on programs written before you could read, running your reactions, your defaults, your reflexive sense of what's possible for someone like you. You can force new behavior through the front door with sheer effort. But if you haven't spoken to the one who guards the thermostat, it will wait, patiently. And the moment your willpower tires, and it always tires, it will quietly walk you home to the old setting and call it common sense. So the work was never really about trying harder, it's about resetting the thermostat itself. And that happens through a slower door than force. It happens through repetition and safety and evidence. Every time you hold a new state a little longer than was comfortable and don't die and don't fall apart, you give the subconscious a new data point. Every time you act as the person you're becoming, even while the old identity screams that this isn't you, you're filing quiet proof that the new setting is survivable. You're not fighting the thermostat. You're slowly, patiently teaching it a new definition of normal. This is why the people who change for good rarely do it in a dramatic leap. The leap feels good, but the thermostat drags them back. Real change looks almost boring from the outside. It's someone returning again and again to a slightly higher setting, holding it through the discomfort of it feeling wrong, until one ordinary Tuesday, it doesn't feel wrong anymore. It just feels like them. That's the moment the reality actually shifts. Not when you first glimpse the new life, but when your nervous system finally stops treating it as a threat and starts treating it as home. And I want to name something gently here because it matters. If your life has looped through the same pattern more times than you can count, the same kind of relationship, the same near miss with success, the same collapse right at the edge of the thing you wanted, you are not broken and you are not cursed. You've been running a program. And a program, unlike a curse, can be rewritten by the one willing to sit with the discomfort long enough to install something new. That discomfort, the wrongness of the new setting before it becomes home, is not a sign you're off course. It's the exact sensation of the thermostat being reset. Most people feel it and flee, straight back to the familiar. The ones who shift feel the very same thing and understand what it is. They stay. They let it feel wrong. They let it become normal. So, we've walked through all three levers now, and the mechanism underneath them. Attention, identity, state, and the thermostat that keeps trying to pull all three back to zero. But there's a question sitting under everything I've said tonight, and I've been saving it. Not how these levers work, why they work at all. Why should the inner world have any grip on the outer one? What kind of universe is even built this way? That's where this stops being technique and starts becoming something closer to a way of seeing. So, why should any of this work? Why should the inner world have the slightest grip on the outer one? Because if it doesn't, then everything I've told you tonight is just a clever way of feeling better, and I have no interest in selling you comfort. Here's the honest answer, and it starts with what we actually know. For 400 years, science ran on a beautiful, powerful assumption that the universe is a machine, that the observer stands safely outside it taking measurements, and that mind and matter are two separate kingdoms that never truly touch. It built the modern world, that assumption. And then, in the early 20th century, physicists went looking at the smallest scale of reality and found something that has quietly unsettled the picture ever since. At that scale, The clean line between the observer and the observed refuses to stay put. The act of measuring seems to participate in what shows up. Now, I have to be careful and honest here. More careful than most people are with this. This does not mean your mind is out there rearranging particles with your moods. Serious physicists disagree, sometimes fiercely, about what these findings even mean. And anyone who tells you the science proves your thoughts control matter is stretching it past what it can bear. I won't do that to you, but strip away the overreach and something genuinely humbling remains. The old, comfortable wall between the inner and the outer, the wall we all quietly built our lives on, is not nearly as solid as we were promised. The observer is in the picture. On some level we don't fully understand. Participation goes all the way down, and you don't need to resolve the physics to feel the human truth of it because you've lived it. You already know from your own experience that the state you're in changes the world you meet. Walk into your own home carrying resentment, and it's a different house than the one you enter carrying tenderness. Same walls, same people, different world. You've felt a room change because you changed. You've watched a whole day turn on a single inner shift. The wall between inner and outer was always more like a membrane. You've been passing through it your entire life without noticing. Let me step out of the ideas for a moment, because I've been talking for a while, and I don't want this to become a lecture. It never was one. I know a little about who tends to find their way to something like this. You're probably not 22. You've lived enough to have built things and watched some of them fall. You've loved people you've lost, made choices you'd unmake, arrived at a season of life where the old answers stopped fully satisfying. And somewhere in the middle of a very full, very responsible life, a quiet question started following you around. Is this it? Is this the whole shape of it? You don't say it out loud much. People depend on you, but it's there in the 3 a.m. moments, in the long drives, in the pause before sleep. If that's you, I want you to know that question is not a symptom of something going wrong. It's the sound of something waking up. The people who stop asking it are not the ones who found peace. They're the ones who fell asleep at the wheel of their own life. The restlessness you feel is not your enemy. It's the part of you that still knows there's more and refuses to let you forget it. And that restlessness is exactly the doorway back to everything we've been building tonight. Because that quiet ache, is this it? Is your attention, your identity, and your state all telling you the same thing at once? The setting you've been living at is no longer where you belong. The thermostat is being questioned, not by me, by you, by the part of you that already knows. So the why underneath the levers turns out to be strangely simple. They work because you were never as separate from your life as you were taught to be. You are not a spectator who occasionally gets lucky. You are a participant woven in, and the inner state you tend to is not decoration on top of your reality. It is one of the quiet forces shaping which version of reality you're standing in. Which means the life you keep sensing, the one just out of reach, was never on the other side of some wall. It's on the other side of a membrane, and you've been standing at it, one honest shift away, longer than you know. Now let me bring all of this home. So let's gather what we found, quietly, the way you'd gather your keys before leaving a house you're finally ready to walk out of. 3 levers. Attention, what you give your awareness to, watering whatever it touches until that becomes the landscape you live in. Identity. The quiet story of who you are. Deciding in advance what your attention is even allowed to look for. And state. The inner weather you broadcast, opening or closing the door to what you're able to receive. 3 levers, and beneath them, the thermostat, that faithful old mechanism trying to drag all 3 back to a normal you never actually chose. And underneath all of it, the thing that makes it more than technique. You were never standing outside your life. You've been woven into it the whole time, a participant passing through the membrane between inner and outer with every state you've ever held. The wall you thought you were up against was never a wall. Here's what I want you to really take with you, though, not as a lesson, just as something true. None of this asks you to become someone you're not. That's the exhausting lie sold by every version of self-improvement that left you feeling like a project that never gets finished. This is the opposite. The 3 shifts aren't about adding anything. They're about setting down what was never yours. The borrowed identity, the inherited fear, the thermostat someone else installed before you could speak. Underneath all of it, the one who was going to live that life you keep sensing was already there, has been the whole time. Waiting patiently for you to stop defending the smaller self long enough to let the larger one breathe. That's the shift, not becoming, remembering. For those of you who feel this pulling at something deeper, who don't want the hour to end here, I've gathered the full architecture of all of this into something called Awaken Your Quantum Shift. It goes past what I could fit tonight into the actual practice of resetting the setting day by day. It's the first pinned comment, if and when it's yours to explore. No rush. It'll be there when the moment is. But before any of that, let me leave you with the only thing that really matters tonight. You've spent so long trying to reach that other life, reaching, striving, chasing it across the years like it was somewhere far ahead of you. And maybe the quiet truth is that it was never ahead of you at all. Maybe it's been standing exactly where you are, wearing your face, waiting for you to turn around. You don't have to become it. You only have to stop pretending you're not already it.